I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I'll take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am. I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I'll take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am. I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am, I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made, please do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm
And he's pedal to the metal, go, go, go! Welcome back to PSGL Tier 4 as we go back racing once again, this time on the lovely streets, well I say streets, the circuit of Bahrain International Circuit. I'm once again joined by George. George, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. I think on the whole, I can't complain. Things are okay. That's about all I've got for you, to be honest. I don't have much more to say about it than that. I'm just all right. Things are just okay. It's been another average week. Nothing new to report.
I'll take an average week. At least it's nothing bad, and you're surviving. That's the main bit.
That is the main bit.
Absolutely. As mentioned, we're here in Bahrain. Another brilliant track on the F1 calendar. Personally, it's one that I do enjoy quite a lot, and you see quite a bit of action. But last week we saw quite an array of mistakes.
On top of that, also, it seems that in the steward's office, which I've been taking a look at over the last few days, there has also been a fair amount of penalties issued for some of the incidents that occurred last week in Barcelona. So, as it turns out, Rishan did not and it ended up going to Goetze instead. So there was a lot of things that kind of went pear-shaped from last week in terms of the standings. But if we take a look at them, or at least I'll try and bring them up and read them out to you at the very least. I believe currently top of the table is Leonard Goetze, and then Rishan got relegated down into second place, with Bottas Samaro currently sitting in third, Thomas Laminen in fourth, and Miltos Karafalidis in fifth. And then down the order, it just goes down the order. So that's how things ended up panning out. A couple of incidents to review from the last week, and as such, they have now been resolved, and hopefully all the bad blood and feuding that was going on in the meanwhile has been resolved also.
Nah, I want that bad blood to stay. I want the tension, want the action to persist forward into the next race. We see the rivalry start to form. So yes and no to the bad blood ending. I always like a bit of a drama. Like, not a majorly bad one, but enough to, spark the interest of the community and go, ooh, this battle's getting a bit spicy. Talking of battles, this track, as I mentioned just earlier, this track has a fine amount of overtaking opportunities, particularly down into turn 1. The start-finish straight being fairly long. You can definitely mount a good attack down there with the DRS, and also into turn 4, which, if you're feeling a bit ballsy as well, ballsy overtaking zones are turn 8, turn 11, and actually one that's more common than you think, turn 13, as I realise my camera is completely messing up because my computer sucks. And then if you're really, really lucky, you get a good run. Turn 14, a very rare place to make an overtake, but it's not out of the blue, especially if you're able to lunge it in quite late, ensuring you pick up the DRS zone.
Yeah, indeed. There's a lot of good opportunities for overtaking at Bahrain, but often what it does come down to is just making sure you don't make mistakes. There's a lot of low traction corners on this track, a lot of hairpins, a lot of difficult braking zones. So more than anything, and arguably more so than last week when it comes to Barcelona, it is more important to make sure that you're keeping things together on track, making sure you're not making any mistakes than it would have been in Barcelona, because there's so many opportunities for things to go pear-shaped for you here at Bahrain. Also, tyre degradation, usually quite tyres, and maybe extending those stints will play more of a role than the overtaking itself today.
Absolutely, as you can probably hear in the background the beep going off, as we're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, GT Omega.
Either way, you can do that.
Here we go, 15 turns of the Bahrain Grand Prix, 3.3 miles of an amazing track. We're looking forward to an interesting race. The track, most notably, we've seen this conditions being quite a dry weather track based in the Sahara Desert. I believe it's the Sahara, but it's based in a desert. The most you're probably going to get is sandstorms, but the F1 game does not simulate it, and as mentioned, 2 brilliant DRS zones, one from turn 15 down to turn 1, and also a turn 10 to turn 11. Greater opportunities, 3, my apologies, from turn 3 and turn 4. How can I forget the brilliant overtaking zone, as we saw Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc switching back and forth between each other throughout the Grand Prix at the start of this season. And Are we going to see a lot of overtaking this time, or much like the esports theme, is it going to be quite calm through the mid sections?
I don't know really, but I'm interested to know who your mom is because that's an interesting name to be sure. Inside of this game, I'm not sure whether you've actually got into it yet or not, but inside the lobby there is somebody named your mom in a Red Bull. So hopefully we can get an update as to actually what that name is because I don't think I'm going to be shouting that one from the rooftops the entire time.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a pretty bold move.
Your
saying...
mom goes on the inside. Unreal. It's just not going to happen, is it? Let's be honest about it.
There's been worse. There's been worse. I can quote League of Legends where I think it was a Chinese player's name was Dick.
Oh yeah, that's happened before in CS as well with Dick Stacy.
Oh yeah, Dick Stacy. Oh my god, don't remind me of that. But yeah, there are plenty of weird names, and esports definitely presents the best of aliases amongst the field. But yeah, definitely an update of who that actually is.
Would be nice to know, most certainly. Either which way, that's actually a Williams they're in, not a Red Bull, but it doesn't matter too much. We're just going to see here people hopping out on their first run, hopefully also getting people into the lobby. I noticed that we were one man short, and hopefully that man has now joined, but I'm not sure whether it will actually allow them into the qualifying session or not. We'll have to see. Whichever way we look at it, though, it's going to be an interesting state of affairs this evening for sure. Are you even into the game yet?
Still loading. You know, this is how brilliant my computer is. Don't worry, ladies and gents, I am planning to get that solid state and fix my computer to the point it actually runs smoothly.
Okie dokie. Well, I can give you an idea as to what's happening.
Hey!
Oh, you can see it now. Wonderful news. Okay, well, in that case, time to get the track map and everything up, I suppose.
Absolutely. Got to get all the details up.
Yes, of course. But aside from that, we'll get right into it. It's going to be outlap time for almost everybody at the moment. One of the first drivers out on track, though, was Andre Molnar. Had reasonable success last week, but also had a little bit of misfortune sprinkled in amongst all of that. And on his first lap, we'll get to see just how well this one goes down. Already a little bit wide of the apex there at turn 1, but so far so good. Moving into the end of the first sector. Second DRS straight, often been a bit of an overtaking hotspot, as you have previously mentioned. This corner here, a little bit difficult on traction, especially when the track is not so rubbered in, and we've just saw a bit of an example there with Molnar's rear stepping out a tiny little bit. Also got to make sure you get it nicely tucked in and traction.
Does that mean I have... Nope, my game is completely kicked out. I don't know how your end is looking.
Mine's looking just fine. Okay, I'll
Have
let you fix it, I guess.
I think I've desynced.
I think you might have done. You might have done.
Not enough players remaining to start the session. Oh, what the hell?
You might have had an issue here. You can hop to a little break screen if you want and try and fix it, by all means.
Well, that is exactly what I'm going to do. Just hold fire, ladies and gents, as we try and work out this technical difficulty. Welcome back, ladies and gents. I do apologise for the technical difficulty of the stream. We should be back with a full lobby and a quick update. You can see that the Haas driver of Jan has put himself on pole with a 127.5, while the rest of the grid not too far away, about 10th behind, being the next driver of Leonard, being also close. But I want to quickly talk about the track itself just in a little bit of detail. I want to focus on an area, if you don't mind. Turn 4. Now, I know that in previous racing, we've seen a lot of the drivers exceeding track limits for Turn 4, using it quite well. But in previous additions to this game, we've also seen people use Turn 4, actually exceeding track limits and gaining an advantage naturally, without the game picking it up. When we see that, especially in iterations in leagues, I know some leagues have the rules set to you have to abort your lap, but in PSGL, I don't recall that being in there. What is your thoughts on that idea?
To be honest, I think it's one of those things, especially in league racing such as this, that's actually quite hard to enforce. So, you know, you're not going to have a camera on each 20 drivers, and you don't have live stewarding particularly in this particular division. So it's hard to enforce, and as such, hard to regulate. So I imagine that there'll be plenty of abuses of that Turn 4 hotspot, but I don't think it will become too much of a prying eyes type issue. As such, anyway, we'll probably get to see if it actually comes into fruition here, because we've just started a lap with Leonard Gertzer. Currently sitting at P2, he is your championship leader too. He won last time out in Barcelona. Inadvertently, though, not quite. Mazepin moment as he spins around at the exit of Turn 3. But it's okay. He should be able to get it back on track and hopefully not impede anybody on their way through. So a number of people on outlaps presently. I think we've got a couple of people on laps also, though. Let's have a look. Andre Molnar is currently finishing a lap, I think, or starting another one. I'm not sure. Yeah, Tamas Gal, what's he up to? Well, yeah,
he's on lap.
Seems to be that he's on lap, and he's just not long started it either. So this could be a good one to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming through into the second sector, definitely the more technical second sector, probably on the calendar personally. It's not easy really to place your car because there's a lot of change direction, first of all, from turns 5, 6 and 7, but then you have to really swing the car to the opposite side of the track quickly for turn 8, straight line it, and then you've got turn 9s and 10, which is, especially turn 10, is really hard because you have to straight line the car to not lock up, but then also take an acute angle to get a good exit. It's not easy, so probably that's why I say it's one of the hardest on the calendar. Plus, also turn 12, put your wheels on the edge, you start spinning, but then you got of turn 14 and technically turn 15, but it's not really necessarily a turn as such. And coming up to the line, it's looking promising, but it's only promising for P2, which is, ever so close to the lead.
It's good, but it's not quite good enough. Speaking of good and not quite good enough as well, 5th place currently sits QKS. Has just started his lap as well. Into the second sector he goes at the moment. Like you mentioned, difficult, especially as he gets the power down and spins himself around. You're on board with one of the McLarens at the moment, Milan Maya, who's also just starting to enter in towards this second sector, or sorry, exit this second sector momentarily. But even still, there's that difficult braking zone. No sign of a lockup this time from Milan Maya, so hopefully this is going to be a pretty decent lap. We'll get to see as soon as he crosses that division line for the end of the second sector where he's at in terms of delta on his previous lap. And at the moment, it's not looking all that too promising. Well, hard to tell, of course, but with all 20 drivers now out on track in one way or another, it's bound to get crowded out there in the Bahrain circuit. Only 500ths up on his lap at the moment for Milan Maya, but maybe there's some time in this final corner or two that he hadn't quite lapped up on his previous run around the Sakir International Circuit. So we'll soon find out as he whips it into what is effectively the final corner. It's certainly the last proper braking zone, or at least the most negligible corner, and it is good enough for P3. There was some time in that final sector, approximately about a 10th. And in the end, that works out for P3.
Drop down to P15, another name that is shining from he was in Tier 5 as of the last season, Dmitry Minik. A strong name at the start of the F5 season. came out strong, definitely didn't have a great qualifying pace in himself, but he has an aggressive play style that would mean that he punches his way through. He does have his elbows out a little too much, bit like Max Verstappen, likes to get his elbows out. If you're not going to move, we are going to crash situation, but it did lead to some good racing. Unfortunately, second half of the season, not too favourable for him, so let's see what he can do. He's in a harder tier now. Is this the right move to go up a tier? Let's see what he can make out. And welcome to tier 4, Dmitry Minek.
Yeah, welcome indeed. Hopefully able to make some impressions later on in the session, but for the time being hasn't really been able to get any inroads in. Speaking of inroads though, Mr. Halliday has just made quite a few inroads at the top of the timing screens. Leonard Goetzer has attempted to get a bit closer, but in all reality, if I'm looking at the timing screens correctly, I'm not sure whether the things have updated totally for you. There you go. But either which way, that is a meaty near 3/10 gap between P1 and P2 at the moment. And that is certainly quite something. We didn't get to see the entirety of the lap, but it certainly must have been something to write home about for it to be a near, what 4/10 better than the rest of the field almost? On the most part, that's certainly something. Certainly 4/10 better than his teammate.
Absolutely, and being 4/10, but you still got a bit of time. 5 minutes left on the clock. It really is up to anyone's game. You know, anyone could pull something out the bag, pull in a lap that is mind-boggling. We're gonna start to see drivers come out about the 3-minute mark, maybe a bit less, but to do their last run. There might be somebody who's brave enough, who's just on an outlap. I don't think anyone actually is, who could maybe punch in a 2-run in this last 5 minutes. I don't think so. So 2 Ferraris are...
don't know, just in laps, I think, or something.
They're definitely in laps, but ever so close. Almost like they're practicing their racing.
I'm not quite sure I'd be trying to practice going off track there for Alexander Johansson, but he seems to be warming his tyres a bit. So whether he's taken a bit of a cool lap after he invalidated somewhere and now is going to look to try and go again remains to be seen. But I think for Rishan, this is going to be him moving into the pit lane here. I think his teammate is also doing the same thing. So both the Ferraris fly back into the pit lane, and then that means that all 20 drivers are now sitting quietly and comfortably inside of the pits, waiting for their final run. You'll probably see them all start to make their way out of the pit lane in about 1 minute's time, with about 2 minutes 30 left on the clock is generally when we start to see that kind of thing happen. But this is indicative of more of what we saw last week. Admittedly, it didn't pan out quite so well for the Haas driver in the race, but Halliday certainly displayed some rather immaculate pace in qualifying that wasn't necessarily quite so easily reflected in the race with some of the misfortune that he encountered. But nonetheless, we'll see whether that can be transformed this week into a race victory. It seems that we're about to have a Mercedes leaving the garage. That is Girofu. And then we'll see if anyone else is going to be doing the same. I think Jerry Van Bussel also be making his way out of the pit lane shortly. Also got Dmitry Minik's out too. So maybe we're going to get those drivers out on track just a tad earlier than we initially anticipated.
Yeah, see what Minik can actually do. And as I mentioned, qualifying not really his strength, but his race pace. Now that is something to die for and to watch. So he needs to put this car somewhere a bit higher. 17th, not strong. I wouldn't say it's out of the question. Never ever rule anybody out of contention, because I've seen drivers from P20 go and win this race. Particularly a guy named Kowalski drove a Brazilian driver who I don't know where he is now. He was an Xbox player. Started P20 against a whole field of contenders. P20 goes and wins it. He did that 3 times in the same series. So what can Minik do as he's about to start his lap?
Well, we'll certainly try and take a look at it. Here we go then. Starting the lap. Rounding that final corner, already getting a bit out of shape with the rear of the car there. Really trying to get the power down as early as is possible to ensure that that straight line speed is in the picture. So a 27.986 to beat at the moment. We'll see what comes of it. Into turn 1, nicely tucked into the apex. It's all about the traction through these first few corners. It's very difficult to find, very rear limited in the way that you're constantly moving the wheel, but also looking for the grip and often that's where you end up getting yourself into a bit of a spin, as we've seen already in this qualifying session so far. Neat on the track limits at turn 4 as well. This will now tuck it into 5-6, down the hill at 7 and 8, and it's going to be a tough old lap here, but so far, so good. It's been tidy at the very least, as much as we might not have a very accurate indication as to what the lap time is at the moment, just because the game doesn't provide us with those. Nice and tidy, a little bit wide of the apex there on that corner, but still gets the car straightened out nicely enough to open the DRS and head down the back straight. A decent overtaking opportunity in the race if you can make it work, but more than anything, just a way to close the gap before you get onto the main straight. This sector, very, very tricky. If you're going to touch the curb, you've got to go for it, completely over it, otherwise stay well clear. And the same into this corner here. You don't want to be taking too much curb because it will massively unsettle the car. And speaking of unsettling the car, it's an invalidated lap for Dimitri Minik.
Yeah, you don't want that on your last lap. He will get enough time to do one more push lap, as Leonard is on his lap, currently P2. He needs to find just a little bit more to cross the line into P1. It's nearly 3 tenths left for Leonard, and he needs to find a lot, as he does keep turn 10, the horrible turn 10, in check. He has a few cars ahead of him where he could eat a little bit of the straight line speed, the slipstream from the cars ahead. Not major amounts, but he is looking strong. First across the line, Gurafu in 14th does not improve, as QKS does put it P2. Milton's in P5. So drivers now crossing the line. There's a few of them ahead of him who can jump. Milan Mayer goes P3. We're going to stay with Leonard. He's been improving. He's been looking good. Is it strong enough to take P1 though? He comes across the line. Is it enough? It's enough for P2. And Hadaj has gone and spun it. Halalage, I mean.
Yeah, Halalage having a bit of a mare on his final lap, but I don't think it's going to matter all that much, to be honest with you, Reese. He is clear at the top of the field, and only Rishan now. That will only put him, best at P4 at the moment with the 27.5, so needs to find a little bit more out of this final sector. Alexander Johansson slides himself up into P2, a much improved performance from last week's qualifying session for the Ferrari driver. But let's see what's going to be in the locker here for the Dutchman. The man who, on track at the very least, won the last race with some supreme consistency in those final laps, only tucks it into 5th place. And ladies and gents, that is your grid. Haladej on pole once again, but it is Alexander Johansson, the surprise performance in the Ferrari, that brings it up to P2, followed by championship leader Leonard Gertz, and then a rather peculiarly placed Aston Martin in QKS.
To be honest, Johansson does not surprise me. He is fast, he is mean, he's got the pace, and he is a man of strategy as well. If he commits to something, he will commit, and it will lead to some very interesting tactics. Some which usually you think, oh, that's never going to work. He pulls it out of the bag. He did this in Miami, pulled out, I think, a 3-stop on what was a 2-stop race. He went and put himself onto the podium when he was sat in P4. So the man has strategy up his sleeve. So sitting in P2 is a great advantage for the Ferrari driver. Of course, Leonard in P3, that's again a strong position to try and claim yet again another win, our championship leader. But Rishan down in P5, it's not his best qualifying, but we know that he's a consistent, focused driver that will just keep going no matter where he's placed. And even if he does, you know, lose off the start, he always comes back.
Yeah, as demonstrated last time out, really, with that pace that he displayed at the end of his final stint on Barcelona, where he was able to crunch in what was, I think, about a 4-second gap to Leonard Gertzer up front, and overtake him, and put time and daylight between he and Gertzer before the end of the race. Unfortunately, of course, with the penalty applied subsequently by the stewards, it wasn't enough for him to hold on to that P1. But I'm pretty sure it would have filled him with some confidence, and it certainly must have felt quite good for him to get into such a potent and powerful position. But it's now race time here at Bahrain. We obviously have seen how our grid has shooked on down. There's no formation lap, of course, so it's going to be an interesting one. I'm not going to make any predictions because you can't tell too much off qualifying, but certainly it's nice to have Alexander Johansson at the top of the field too. And I'm hoping, at the very least, we get a decent battle for the front few positions, whether it be a bit of a train, whether it be a bit of a quartet or something. I'm excited either way, Reese. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Absolutely. Been loving the qualifying, loving the racing that these guys present. But it's now down to this moment. Qualifying done. We're on to the race. There comes the lights. 3, 4, 5 lights are showing. Alexander Johansson in the best position he could be, and they are off. But it will be the Haas driver who gets a better launch and holds out the lead. The Leonard in the Red Bull finds good pace, but Alexander Johansson, he's saying no. Just because I lost a bit at the start, I ain't gonna let the Red Bull get past. And Alexander is still gonna go side by side all the way down into turn 4. He has the inside line, but he does not have the pace. The Red Bull will take second place off the Ferrari driver. QKS holding his ground against Rashan. Rashan trying to do what he can. He's going to make a lunge into turn 8, but the lunge comes from Milan Meyer, who's going to try and get better exit from there into turn 9, 10, but Milan Meyer's compromised his position as he now has an AlphaTauri up his rear end. That's going to be Adrian Molnar. Molnar again. It's a good traction, but it's not good enough. The drivers are getting the moves, but they've not got the grip off the get-go, and as it sorts themselves out, as Dmitry Minik finds himself up into P8.
And that's up 11 places, by the way, for Dmitry Minik. He has found himself up an absolute landslide worth of positions at the moment, because he is the only driver on the grid to have started on those yellow-walled medium tyres. And they have been supreme off the start here in Bahrain. Already at the front, though, we're seeing a couple of drivers take into the escape road a little bit. Off track a tiny bit there for Johansson. But yeah, speaking of Dmitry Minik, medium tyres have catapulted him from, I think, 19th on the grid up into 7th by the end of lap 1. That is absolutely mental driving, and it shows the difference between the mediums and the hards in terms of getting off the line and getting the power down right away. Before turn 1, the man was already in up to 11th or so. He made a number of places off the line, great braking in towards turn 1, and as such putting those mediums to good use.
Yeah, I said Dimitri's an aggressive driver, and that goes to show he's taking risks where essentially he didn't need to. He's got that fresh tyre, he's got the pace advantage, but no, he won't settle for anything less than than first. So he will push all the way to the end as Milan Meyer is looking to the inside of Rishan, decides against it, and now look who's at the rear end. That's going to be lovely Dmitry Minik. I think Dmitry has got enough pace. He's going to take it around the outside. No, not just yet. But yeah, you need to be careful with this, man. We're going to keep an eye on him because he's going to do something crazy in a second. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does take the risky move. He looks to the outside, nothing there. But look, he's practically shoving the McLaren down the road.
Well, now he's in the slipstream, potentially going to look towards diving into the end of turn 14 and 15. Going to slide it up the inside. Supreme braking performance on those mediums. Does give a little bit of push and shove towards Milan Meyer on the outside of the track, but will now try and settle himself down into the wheel tracks of the Ferrari ahead. Already gaps opening at the front of the field. Jan Halliday has really put pedal to the metal and has got 1.8 seconds worth of an advantage already over Leonard Goetze. He's not having anybody ruin his race this week. He wants to get clear and away. Meanwhile, Alexander Johansson is still in contention with the Red Bull, but behind him, a second gap has opened up there as well. So we're starting to see a little pair, a partnership in behind the clearly supreme Jan Halliday today, with QKS, the leader of the train behind that goes all the way down to Rainbow in 13th, which I've been informed is the name of your mom.
It's still a brilliant name, and I probably will forget it was Rainbow, to be honest. But yeah, Halliday, what a performance. He's almost putting in qualifying pace off the get-go. And you need to do that off the start, because if you don't create that gap, don't break the second mark, you're going to have constant threat from the driver behind. Now, Leonard's going to have to be looking at his rearview mirror constantly. Alexander Johansson, I've said he's a man of strategy. He likes to play things differently. So, keep an eye of what this man will do, because he will pull something out the bag. Dmitry, I'm just going to drop back to him. Guess what? He's ready for another overtake. He's looking at Rishan, a driver who last week showed he's calm, cool, and consistent. But now he's got a threat, a real threat, from the Aston Martin. How cool will this man be as Dimitri Minik closes up as Alexander Johansson also ahead, gets
that's
past.
a lunge.
That is a massive lunge from Dimitri Minik. I told you he likes to get his elbows out, and once again, he will. We head to the front for P2 as the Red Bull tries to fight back into turn 4. He has the inside line, but Leonard does not have the braking to outbrake Johansson, and Johansson now has his eye on the Ferrari driver. The Haas driver, and trying to close a gap. Now, it's going to be difficult, but I won't be surprised if he tries.
No, neither will I. This will be certainly interesting to see if Johansson has the pace to do so. He has been off track a good few times, and there is another example of it. And there is the 3-second time penalty. I was wondering when it would be coming. I've seen him just teetering offline, understeering, or having a moment, not being able to quite get the car where he wants it. So maybe struggling with setup or the high fuel load at the moment. But either which way you look at it, that's the 3-second time penalty. And I have counted each of those instances myself. So moving back down the field, will QKS get out the way for his
Dimitri
teammate?
Minik, 3 seconds.
In himself picked up a 3-second time penalty for exceeding track limits. I will also mention that Minik has not been particularly conservative with his battery. In fact, he's been quite liberal with his deployment. Both he and the Aston Martin in front of him, though, are running on less than 10%. So this should be a relatively easy overtake down and up the inside here. Just off his teammate, just using the DRS to get on by. Neither of them really going to be fighting that one too much. I think QKS knows that if he were to fight Minik in his current form on the current tyres, that he would end up losing far more time than it would be worth. And there's a chance that Minik might be able to close that gap to Goetzer ahead with keeping his teammate in the DRS too.
Yeah, it's just a game of patience now. Play it till the next stint, well, the next pit stop, which will be,
lap 16, I think.
Yeah, I was
lap 13 to 16.
I was literally about to say lap 16, and I feel a lot of the drivers will try and go a bit longer than others, because you're going on to the mediums next for a lot of them. Why not? The only person who's not going to be in a comfortable position after the pit stop will be Dimitri Minik, who will have the option to pit earlier than the rest of them. But what would you do? Would you stay out, try and push the medium tyres for as long as you can, or would you go and pit earlier for the hard tyre?
I'd want to stay for as long as I've got a pace advantage. And if the mediums start to drop off and the hard runners start to come back at me, that might be the time in which I want to drop into the pits. And then when you get towards the end of the race, when the subsequent medium runners at the end of the race will also be struggling on slightly more worn tyres, and you will also be on worn hard tyres, it's a bit fairer of a fight. So in the pit stops phase, you can choose to be a little bit more liberal with the way that you go about things. But speaking of that DRS train, by the way, it is fully in effect now, as Dimitri Minik has managed to close that gap down to Leonard Goetzer, and as such has sorted a little bit of a DRS train out now that goes all the way down to 11th place, if I'm not mistaken, as Tomas Gill and Istvan Nagy have changed places over in P9 and 10.
Yeah, Minik is on a flyer, and it's not going to be too long until we say goodbye to the Red Bull driver, as the Aston Martin driver is hunting them down. And even with a flashing light at the rear end, he's somehow able to use all of his ERS and still maintain, enough overtaking power, because he was doing overtakes on drivers even when he was having a flashing light, and they had more battery. So it's very interesting for sure, as Dimitri Minik only 4/10 behind the Red Bull driver, and that gap ever so closing. But meanwhile, the gap between Alexander Johansson and Hadley, that's increasing. That's now nearly 2 seconds between the Haas and the Ferrari driver. So you've got to ask yourself, especially as a Ferrari driver, what do I need to do to close this gap? Because I've got a roaring medium runner who's about to take my position if I'm not careful.
Oh, to be honest, if you're struggling to close the gap, and you're also struggling to keep the car on track whilst trying to do so in Alexander Johansson's position, I see no reason why you would actually tend to fight Dimitri Minik if he's going to continue on with this pace for much longer. Because, of course, with those medium tyres comes the inherent pace advantage and the opportunity to be dragged up to the back of Halliday by means of DRS. So there's a chance that if the time can be made up in the corners by the medium runner, it would be something that I would encourage if I were in Alexander Johansson's shoes, Dimitri Minik to come on through if he were to get ahead of Goetze. But I fear now that maybe towards 7-8 laps into this race, these mediums might not be looking so healthy as they once were.
Drop a bit further back. Let's go back down the field. QKS down in P5. The second gap, he wasn't able to keep up with Dimitri Minik and his storming pace. Is forming a nice little train behind him. Rashan in P6, right behind him, the Milan Mayer, Andriy Molnar, Itzvan Nage, and Thomas Gale amongst the people in this train who are all ever so close and all ever so waiting for QKS to make a mistake or someone else to attempt to move, and nobody's really... It's a stalemate at the moment. It's a game of chess right now, and nobody's really making a necessary move that could grant you an opportunity. Well, saying that, QKS is a flashing light at the rear end, but that's probably the only thing that is a potential move there.
Yeah, obviously you got to also factor in that QKS does not have DRS assistance, which Rishan is starting to look like he's about to make a move upon, and has done so in towards turn 1. Of course, that will enable QKS to have DRS into the second DRS zone here, all things being well, because I believe the move was made just before the DRS zone, and that is going to be the case, but I don't think there's really going to be enough time on this slightly shorter straight for that DRS to be as effective, and Rishan as such has got through. Rishan is sitting on 22% battery at the moment, so there might be an option for him to try and close on up. And I think we're finally seeing those medium tyres of Dimitri Minik start to fall off a little bit here. Also, the lack of battery is certainly not going to be helping, because when he wants to deploy it, it is just not there. And as such, Minik has fallen off the back of this pair in front of him. And as such now will be kind of dropping back into the clutches of the other hard runners. More places for Rishan to have. This is where Minik's going to really need to prove his mettle as a very good defender as well as a good attacker. We've already seen he's been good on the offensive so far in this race, rising from the back of the grid all the way up to P4 in just the opening 8 laps. But now he's going to have to do his best to not fall all the way back down that grid in a very quick amount of time.
I've seen his defense. It's not bad. I'll give it a solid 7. Not the strongest in terms of defense. He can get a little bit too reckless in his moves. He can get a bit too star-stuttered by actions that do happen. But overall, he's not too bad. But Andriy Molnar did go wide, and this is going to allow Itzvan to have a look down the inside. He will make the move, but he locks up straight on, and this is going to allow an opportunity for Molnar to come straight back at him. And critically, the other AlphaTauri driver will also pitch in an idea and have a little shot at P8. Sorry, P9. But just too short of a straight, so an opportunity arose, and Nage just didn't capitalize correctly, locking up into turn 1, and critically, an opportunity wasted.
Well, on top of that as well, that little kerfuffle there in the first couple of corners of the lap has also allowed Lucas Hendricks now to start to join the party here as well. So this becomes a much longer train all the way back to Rainbow in P13. Now, let's just take stock of our succeeding drivers who succeeded last week in Barcelona. Jerry Van Bussel down in 17th at the moment. You also had good performances out of Karafalidis, who's sitting in 14th, already with a penalty. And on top of that, Thomas Laminin was our first retiree of this week. Pulled into the pit lane, I think, at the end of the second lap. So not a good time for somebody who I think sits about 4th in the championship at the moment. Of course, this week we don't actually have Zamaro, I think it was, or whoever's 3rd in the championship. That's a replacement drive on the Alpine from Rainbow. But irrespective of that, from Nicholas Aleda this week. But irrespective of that, it is going to be a pretty shook up order from what we saw last week, should we say. This little fight though at the back of the field, or the midfield I should say, down from about QKS to Tomas Gal, has been exciting to say the least, and it isn't going to show any signs of slowing down now. Rishan still holds the advantage at the front of this train, and Minik has done everything he can to get back into the DRS of Goetze.
Alexander Johansson actually closed very slightly. That gap, the last time we spoke about them, was 1.9. It's down to 1.7. It is looking like it's slowly dropping as That's Dimitri Minik. I don't know what's happened there, but he's dropped down a few positions, as well as the other Aston Martin has spun as well. What is wrong with Dimitri Minik? A brilliant drive, up 15 positions originally, now finding himself amongst the train of drivers. We caught him in a squirm, but what was the squirm about? Because he is he's in the death zone right here. He doesn't have the tyres. He doesn't have ERS. He is struggling right now. This is not where you want to be. Unfortunately, QKS loses out the most out of the entire pack.
I'm not quite sure what happened with QKS there. He seemed to just kind of drop off the back of the field. And considering that there was a buffer between he and Dimitri Minik, his teammate, I feel that they might be separate incidents. Because, of course, Risham was ahead of QKS throughout that entire encounter. So now Minik, with a lot of work to do, he's proven already that he has pace and the ability to overtake, but now stuck in a DRS train without any ERS advantage over people, and without, of course, that tyre advantage, as you mentioned, it isn't going to be a fun time for him. So we'll have to keep an eye on his progress, or his regress, depending on how his race starts to pan out from this moment forward. But at the front, let's take our eyes back to the Haas. I think he's sitting quite comfortably here for Mr. Halliday. I think the rest of the field behind him, he's kept this gap consistently at about 2 seconds, and I think he's just keeping a little bit in hand over everybody. You know, doesn't need to push too hard, knows that his limits are behind him, and he knows that limit is about 2 seconds is where he's comfortable, and I think he has more in hand if he wants to go ahead and push for it.
At this point, if you got the pace, would you start to consider, because he's holding a 2 second gap quite nicely, would you start to consider maybe going hard to softs?
I don't think that's really reasonable on this track of all tracks, but there has been a mistake actually made by Alexander Johansson, struggling again with the rear of the car, and it has allowed Leonard Goetze now to have an attack at the front of this pair. Of course, that has also given a big advantage back to Jan Halliday, but going back to your point, I don't really think it's too viable on Bahrain. The tyre degradation is just far too high. If we were having a conversation about a track like Silverstone, for example, or even Paul Ricard, or Spa, maybe, one of these kind of low degradation tracks, then maybe, yeah, I could see your point, but I think for the time being, it's not going to be the race that they would have wanted for a soft stop, and it's certainly not going to be the race that Dimitri Minik would have wanted. 5-second penalty compounded on top of that 3-second penalty he already had means that his race is as good as over inside of a DRS train. He will retire from the session.
Yeah, I think it's too early for Dimitri to retire. It's something that another fellow commentator told me, don't give him this early. If it was near the end, okay, you've spun and it's right at the back, then yeah, fair play. But we're still early, a safety car could still present itself. There's so much that can happen, and giving in this early, you're missing out on opportunities. You might miss out on a 3 points. You don't know what's gonna happen. But it's his choice. If he's feeling not with it, then absolutely do what you need. But yeah.
Yeah, certainly not the opening race that Minik would have wanted, but irrespective of that, he showed some good overtaking prowess in the early laps of the race, which will certainly hopefully go noticed for the rest of the season, and we'll get to see hopefully some more of him moving forward. But as it is, Alexander Johansson currently sitting pretty in P3. We'll keep an eye on this battle, but I think further down the field in P6 is also where I want to turn my attention to, because Andre Molnar and the rest of this DRS train is still holding station for now, and I feel like this is where we're going to be finding ourselves for a little bit of a while inside of this race. We're just going to be seeing most folks taking it nice and easy, chilling it out for a bit, making sure they just get towards the end of this stint. It is a tricky track at the best of times, Bahrain, and when your tyres are starting to go off in many of these very difficult traction zones where traction is so hard to find, especially on worn hard tyres, you don't want to be making too many mistakes. So as such, I don't think we'll be seeing too many drivers pushing one another to the limits until the pit stop phase, which should be coming up within the next 3 laps or so.
Yeah, I was going to say that you said lap 13 was the absolute minimum, as your mum gets a 3-second tyre penalty. I'm sorry, I had to do that. QKS finding some pace, yes, after his little incident down in P17. Is there an opportunity to maybe regress back? Looking at the timing boards, no. Jerry Van Bussel, 20 seconds behind the next driver ahead of him. He is down in the dirt. Unless there is a safety car, I don't think our current fastest lap will really get anything of it, but I'll tell you who's going to get something of it. Alexander Johansson is getting rightio little punchy here as he rounds turn 13, sorry, get my numbers up, and he's also close as Milan Mayer overtakes Rishan. He's done waiting behind the Ferrari driver, but we stick with the P2 battle as that is spicing up ever so nicely as Alexander Johansson is getting closer. He might look for a move, but he decides against it just yet. Is he holding fire for the turn 4 opportunity? Is the first person is it's Van Nage into the pits. He's going to be changing to the medium tires, and no, Alexander Johansson's just a little bit too far away really to mount an attack.
Yeah, once again, Johansson struggling for traction out of those first couple of corners, getting the rear a bit lit up once more. We've seen it a few times already that he hasn't necessarily been looking too comfortable with the rear of the car around this Bahrain circuit, and it has been costing him valuable tenths. And as you see already, out of every traction zone, he is struggling, having to use a bit of the battery to keep up on some of these shorter straight areas now in towards turn 9 and 10. He's going to have the advantage of DRS down this back straight, which should give him a little bit of that time that he has lost to Goetze back. They're just going to try and slot back in alongside or behind, just about 5 tenths down at the moment. But looking back down the field, I don't think there's going to be too many moves made by Johansson, but Milan Mayer now with the well, I suppose I was going to say that he's in the driver's seat, but I suppose the other 20 drivers on the grid are also in the same position. But you understand the turn of phrase here. He's at the front of this DRS train. He is the train conductor now, and he's going to try and break a bit of a gap between himself and the Ferrari behind. Yeah,
you've got to keep an eye out. This man here, it's Van Nage. He pitted a little bit earlier than the rest of the guys. Who is going to respond to it? Alexander Johansson's deciding he's going to make his pit stop. It's not really a threat for the McLaren driver who's pitted early, but none of the mid-pack train is going to take that risk. It's only Alexander Johansson who's deciding, hey, this is the right time to pit. This is my opportunity to pounce and try and get an undercut on Leonard and possibly close the gap on Halliday if he can. But critically, I think he's closed the gap a little bit to Johansson, so he's on a flyer, but is it enough to really upset the big train?
I'm not going to know until we start getting pit stops now from the train, and I think we're going to see a reaction here from a number of drivers inside of that train. At least we'll see a reaction, I think, out of Goetze. I think he has to respond, otherwise he risks losing too much time to Johansson. And as such, I think even with that 3-second penalty, you've got to be taking it into account the fact that Johansson has displayed at least reasonable pace despite his mistakes so far. So there is a chance that if he cleans things up on these grippier tyres, that he can get outside that 1-second window and continue to break away up to 3 seconds, which is exactly what Goetze doesn't want. So we're going to be seeing some sort of response, I imagine, out of the Red Bull driver. Maybe in not this lap, but the next one at the very least. Halliday is just going to gets himself slowed down just before the line. That's also going to be the starting pistol for Milan Mayer to do the same. Andre Molnar stays out. Rishan now comes in. Tomas Gau comes in. Andrew Korapi comes in. Lucas Hendrick also. It's a busy pit lane down there, but it's going to be a quick stop, hopefully, for all of these drivers to get back out on track and have a fair fight of things. Now, the real question is going to be, where does Johansson come out in regards to his opposition? It seems that he's going to be out behind Goetze. But remember, Goetze's out on cold tyres right now. Dumped all of his battery on that previous time round. So this gap is going to come down very, very fast to the extent that Johansson will likely be able to overtake if Goetze is not able to get the heat into those medium compound Pirellis. Now, closing up. Look at that closing speed in the overhead shot. That's absolutely mental there for Johansson. But I think maybe enough has been done here by Goetze on his in-lap to make this one work just enough. I think he's going to have the tyres heated up maybe just enough to defend by the end of this sector, and that's going to be the overtaking opportunity that Johansson would have otherwise looked for. So Goetze has covered this one off well.
I'll tell you who's made a brilliant move. It's Van Nage. He pitted earlier than the rest of the pack, and he's now in P6, and he has a 2-second gap from the driver behind. So his strategy has massively worked, and now he can actually start to look and hunt down the front pack. So what was, I think he was, what, P8, P9? He's now in P6. He's sitting comfortably.
Goetze. Of course, those mediums just one lap better at the moment, but Goetze is not going to take this one lying down already. Opens things up at the exit of turn 3, DRSing towards turn 4. Where have I seen this one before? With a Ferrari and a Red Bull at Bahrain into these chopping and changing DRS straights. Still side by side as it round the outside. Looks to go Johansson. Has the inside for the switchback, but it's a cutback again there from Goetze. Round the outside at the bottom of the hill. Turn 7. Going to be a tough one to try and make it work if they're going to try and go side by side into turns 8 and 9. It's going to be tricky. Braking is tough. No understeer here from Goetze. Doesn't lock up. And that keeps Johansson behind, but also gives over DRS to the Ferrari. And now the Ferrari's going to have an opportunity. Going to look to try and maybe dive up the inside here. It's going to be a tight one. Bails out of it slightly, but Goetze gives him room, so he's going to be invited back in up the apex. Double apex up the hill. Now trying to go around the outside on these slightly fresher mediums. It's going to be Goetze to concede the position as they go back into the back straight. But I fear this battle's not done, Reese. We're going to be going back again when the DRS is activated on that main straight.
I will not be surprised if it does. As you can see the flashing red light from the Ferrari. So Goetze is going to say to himself, right, I've actually probably got a bit more ERS here. Let's go for one more round. Look how close Goetze is going down into turn 1. This is going to be a free opportunity and definitely not going to be an easy comeback from the Ferrari driver. Goetze goes down the inside. He's not got a clear overtake here. So the Ferrari will have better traction on the exit and is definitely going to try and mount a re-attack. DRS is going to be in favor, but is the ERS strong? Hell yeah it is, as Goetze will hold the position finally. The overtake is complete and Goetze holds P2 for now.
Yeah, well, all of that, and look at the gap that Halliday has been able to make because of all their fighting. It's now up to 4 seconds. You can't help but feel that in a field this closely contested, 4 seconds is enough to have it in the bag. It's been a dominant performance from Halliday so far, and barring a mistake, it looks like he's got this one neatly wrapped up. But the battle for P3 is, a battle for P2 at the very least, is far from over. Alexander Johansson here, if he's got any wits about him, will want to just sit in behind Goetze for a minute now and try and open up this gap again back towards P4.
Yeah, I'd sit comfortably and very relaxed into his position. Just a note, Rishan getting past Itzvan. Rishan not wasting any time to be at the head of the train, taking a comfortable position there. But he doesn't really pull away. He's not...
To make sure that penalty does not lose him a podium. You back?
Yeah, sorry, you dipped out. I started talking then.
You lagged out for a long time for me there, my boy.
Oh, I do apologise. I was just mentioning how the Itzvan has got overtaken by Rishan. Rishan has not really gained much off that position. He's not capitalised on the opportunity from the overtake. So it seems to be a move that hasn't worked except for track position, which, okay, come lap 27 might be favourable, but you are then risking, you know, the DRS train. We can talk about that for ages. It's going to be a reoccurring topic. It's a massive thing in F1.
No, you are absolutely right. The DRS train is massively important. But I was saying, I don't know whether you could hear it or not, that for Alexander Johansson, the important thing is that he manages to maintain this 3-second gap back to P4, because that penalty otherwise will be rendering him out of a podium place. So for the time being, I suggest that it's probably in his best interest to just tuck in behind Goetze for a bit, and they can cooperate to get a bit more of a gap. And then maybe he can try and force the mistake from the Red Bull driver later on. But for the time being, Halliday still leads up front, extending that margin once more now to 4.2 seconds. Meanwhile, down the order, it's the McLarens that are looking particularly racy as they're starting to get towards the gearbox of Rishan now.
Yeah, we can see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3 teams all lined up amongst each other. Of course, you have to remind you all, this league is not a team-based league. They're just in cars. It doesn't actually mean anything to them. Yeah, we do keep track of some of the points because, you know, it's for good fun. But they're out there for themselves, so it's all or nothing about themselves. You might get one or two might speak to each other and be like, right, I'm about to pit at this point, you pit at that point, whatever. But it doesn't matter. Everyone's out for blood. Everyone is here for themselves.
Best way to be. race for yourself. I mean, unless you are, I don't know, let's say fighting for P2 in the F1 World Championship, in which case your teammate doesn't want to fight for you at all. But that's a different point. That's a different point. That's a different point. That's a different point. Anyway, at the moment, these guys holding station, we're back in towards that DRS train now, where everything seems to have just settled down a little bit. And I think Alexander Johansson realizing that he needs to settle down a tad as well and make sure that Rishan doesn't use any of that mercurial pace that we've seen him have before in Barcelona to close this gap on down. But I wouldn't be too surprised whether he does, because if you recall, in Barcelona, it was about the last 10 laps where he'd strapped on those yellow walled mediums and was just able to fly away from the pack in behind him and leap up to the leader in front of him. Now, whether or not he's going to be able to get towards Halliday is a different story, but it's certainly in the question that he could get towards P2 and 3.
I wouldn't rule it out, but it's going to be interesting what he can do. Is you can see the AlphaTauri driver. Oh no, it wasn't. It was the Williams driver. Or is that Alpine? That is Williams. I can never remember the colours.
Yes, it is. It's Williams. Lucas Hendrick.
Yeah, Lucas Hendrick. Going wide, getting another 3-second time penalty, and critically, it's more penalties that you don't want. And talking of penalties, we'll get a quick information on the penalty situation. You can see on your screen 3 seconds for Alexander Johansson, which will currently, as we speak, leave him in P3, which is where we need to really talk about the guy ahead behind him, Rishan. He's going to know there's a 3-second time penalty. His bar will just show Alexander Johansson, only just. And in his mind, he's now got to close that gap, and he's doing a good job. He's at 2.8, so he is going to actually now claim that position. But you've got to really work it, as there seems to be a spinner. That looks to be car number 10. No, it's all good. I think Lucas Hendrick did spin, but car number 8 now, which is Itzvan Nage, goes wide and is now put under threat by Andrew Corpora? Andrew, by him.
Go with?
I think it's a Spanish name. I think he's a Spanish man.
Sounds right to me.
Sounds right. As Andrew does hold the position ahead of Itzvan and gains a lovely position. But Itzvan, he went wide. Was he forced wide? We don't know. We didn't see.
No, either way, that has been the whole shebang that was necessary for Rishan here to start to open a gap. For just a second there, it was tickling over 1 second. But, of course, now with DRS, we're going to see that gap quite handsomely reduced back on down. So all that hard work that Rishan's been putting in, all for naught. But just ahead of him, he hasn't seemed to really be able to exercise any of that pace that we saw him working with last week. And there it is, by the way, Lucas Hendrick dropping down the field, pit stop required. So maybe some instant involving Lucas Hendrick there has forced him into the pit lane for damage, repairs, or something not too dissimilar. And as such now, with just 7 laps to go and 7 laps to tick off, everything is starting to settle down a little bit. Jerry Van Bussel.
And I think he's just lagged out once again. I do apologise, ladies and gents, for the audio. Hopefully he does.
Or your mum. This one is...
Oh, he goes back, and he disappears again.
Oh no, I'm all here. What happens is that I think your computer or internet or something decides to just stop. Like your stream on Discord freezes to me, and then everything else just goes mad weird, and I don't hear you or see you or anything, and I'm oh no, where's Reese gone? I'm so cold and alone.
Don't worry, it's okay. I'm just gonna stroke your hair. It's all right.
Oh, thanks, baby.
Yeah, so we did mention that Jerry Van Bussel does retire. You know, we're close to the end of this race now. The likelihood of a safety car is becoming more minimal, but even so, there is opportunities there. As Miller Mayer, he's saying, you know what, Rishan, if you're not going to take the opportunity to close this gap, I'll do it instead. As Miller Mayer does overtake and get ahead, but you can see ahead, Goetze is also closing down that gap. Has Rishan got the pace to retake the position? Nope, not just yet. So Miller Mayer, that overtake has cost him about 6/10 now, and he's now got to work an additional 6/10 to get back to that 3-second gap. Now, realistically speaking, He needs to get this time about 2.5 seconds, and then he's comfortably going to be taking P3.
Yeah, that'll be perfect if he can get up towards that position. But for the time being, I'm seeing a couple of mistakes cropping up here from Alexander Johansson. Just in towards turn 7 that time around, I spotted him going just a tad wide and inviting a bit of a sniff from Goetze. I don't really think Goetze is going to be too excited with fighting with Johansson. I feel like that's a bit of an unnecessary risk for the German at this point in the race. He knows that the Swede has that 3-second time penalty. And I don't think really he's looking to try and tempt fate with any kind of kerfuffle or unnecessary altercation moving into the later parts of this race. But Milan Mayer may be certainly looking to try and get in on the action. He started to try and break Rishan a little bit. And if I'm Rishan, I'm quite happy to let him do this because I'm going to have that DRS assistance. So if he can drag me up a little bit closer to stealing a position off of my teammate or something, I'm more than happy to going to be doing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be too disappointed as well. But as well as dragging Rishan, you're also dragging the rest of the field. So it is a lot of work. And you can see just in the distance, the flashing red lights. So he's already used a lot of ERS. But a lot of these drivers have this main pack, the main train will use and eat up their ERS a lot more than, you know, the two ahead who are only focusing on each other. So they can lift and coast. You know, if they do get overtaken, well, that's not too bad. You've only got one car ahead of you. Now you can save the RS, you can stick it behind the DRS and use that to gain an advantage. You can see the array of lights lighting up the street and lighting up my smile right now with this great racing.
Yeah, it's good at the moment, but everything is settling down a bit. Milan Mayer is seriously putting in some strong laps right now, though, to try and get within that 3 seconds of Alexander Johansson. At the moment, he is just about, what, half a second shy. I'm not totally sure what the full gap is. Obviously, you have to work that out between Leonard Goetze as well. I factored into all of that. But Goetze, I think, just backing it off a little bit here, doesn't want to be too involved. Like I say, if anything does start to go wrong with him and Johansson, just quite happy to sit inside the DRS. But Mayer behind is pushing on now. And just taking a look at the tyre situation, Milan Mayer's tyres are exactly the same age as Leonard Goetze's, but 1 lap younger than Alexander Johansson. So that might come into play towards the end of this race.
It might play a lot, but he's used all of his ERS on that straight. Now he's getting, of course, you regenerate your ERS through braking and a little bit of engine heat also regenerates a bit of ERS, but and you use it all on that straight, and then you have another straight ahead of you. That's a dangerous game you're playing because he's teetering on this edge, Milan Mayer. He's at 0.8. He knows in his head that he can pull that gap and that the car behind him will not have a DRS, as that's the side he wants, as Rishan gets squirmish and now comes a cornering section. So if Milan Mayer puts in some good corners, some good traction, and stays ahead for a little bit longer, Milan Mayer is gapped Rishan and dropped him off down at back as it's still a second mark. He's got another straight to deal with. It's 0.1. I think he's done it. Milan Mayer,
just on it.
He's gapped Rishan.
He's got it. He's got it. He's broken the DRS now. He's just gone past the detection line, which means that Rishan Jacobs behind will not have that DRS. Instead, Milan Mayer is going to have it. Well, he's not going to have it, but he's going to be looking now to try and crunch the gap down towards Alexander Johansson.
Oh,
just needs another couple of tenths, and he will have that 3-second window that he's so looking for. Things are getting spicy towards the back of that, though. Rishan not having DRS has been lay as a victim to the AlphaTauri behind. Tomascal has certainly gone for it, and now back ahead, Rishan has gotten. That's only going to play into the hands of Milan Mayer as well, because they're going to keep tussling with each other, holding one another up, and that's going to give Milan Mayer more breathing room to have.
Absolutely, and he can fly away. And Milan Mayer, you know what? If he can close that to about 2 seconds, he will 100% take the podium, and that's all what's on his mind. That's all that he's focusing, is close that gap and get up to the pack. Because if he can get it to 2 seconds, as mentioned, bang, he has got himself a podium. And you know Leonard Goetze will not back down to Alexander Johansson. Though that being said, is he playing it a little safe? Because as I said that, he's dropped to a second.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason really for Goetze to push too hard. He knows that with only, what, 3 laps left now, he's pretty consistent. He's going to pretty obviously get second place, providing he doesn't make any mistakes. Just needs to make sure he doesn't stay any further back than just the 3-second window that's required of him. So I don't know whether it would be worth him backing off some more and giving some assistance to Milan Mayer, but I think that might be playing a risk too much as to whether Mayer gets past you or not, and you lose out anyway and stick on 3rd place. But let's just put it this way. Goetze needs to take no risks. Alexander Johansson needs to take all the risks, and Alexander Johansson is the one who's already on that 3-second penalty and has already been looking worse for wear throughout the course of this race. Meanwhile, again, the AlphaTauri has tried to go past Rishan Jacobs this time, and it has worked out for Tomascal. This time he's got ahead at the end of turn 4, and he's going to hopefully hold this one now for the rest of the lap.
Yeah, now Andre Molnar will possibly conjure a thought of, all right, that Ferrari driver's dropping back quite a bit. Let's take advantage of this and capitalize on the opportunity here. But Rishan, we know he's a fighter. We know he's one to keep going and not give in too easily, so he might try and mount an attack back onto the AlphaTauri. We're in the window now, lap 27. This is where we're going to see more risks playing out, more opportunities of where you're just going to go, screw it, I'm lunging in. And it's now or never. As we're about to head, you can see the white dot of Haladej rounding the final corner. He's about to start lap 28, and oh, I thought Thomas Galler was getting a bit out of shape. He was trying to get some heat in the tyre, costing him valuable time. As here comes Rishan. Is he got the pace and the straight line speed to take on the AlphaTauri driver? But you got to be careful, the second AlphaTauri driver right behind him. As into the first corner he will not go. He'll have to wait patiently and try and make the move into turn 4. If he gets a good exit here, he might be able to do something, but it's looking too far away, and I don't think that's going to happen. P11, that looks good for you. I don't know if he's gone, if he's disappeared. As P11, the fight for it's not even the last remaining point. That's P10. But that looking ever so feisty into turn 1, but no success from it from either driver. Eventually does drop within into the 2-second mark. It's not enough yet to really say that he's going to have 3 seconds, so he needs to push just that little bit more on this final lap to very much claim P3. And are you back, Morgan?
Now? I can hear you now.
I can hear you, yes.
There we go. Not sure what's going on there. Either which way, yeah, I don't know what you were saying. I can't follow on from it. Didn't hear a word of it. But it looks as if Milan Mayer may be within that 3 seconds soon.
He's getting close. Ever so close. He needs to just push that little bit more. And I think he's going to be down to timings. And just looking at the clock is what's going to decide it. As Rimash is going to go super wide. He's going to go deep into turn 1. He's playing aggressive. And you know that Thomas will fight back. He will 100% go for the charge. As well as his teammate Andre will look at the rear from the outside to the inside. He switches around, dancing around, but it's not going to be ever so successful. But the twitchiness of the AlphaTauri will compromise him. His teammate Andre Molnar, if he could keep close, he might be able to lunge something into turn 8. And no, he won't. But I think Milan Mayer has done it. He's won the podium.
It's getting closer and closer at the moment. He is just a couple of tenths outside of it, actually. 1.5 tenths each way is not going to be enough for him to get onto the podium. He needs to get it down just a little bit. Milan Mayer still has a long way to go in order to get there, of course, as well. And he's running out of time to do so. It's going to be a matter of hundredths, potentially, as it comes down to it. He is teetering on the precipice of being able to be put through onto the podium here. Meanwhile, on the flip side of things, I think Rishan has this one down. I think the charging AlphaTauris behind him are not going to be in a position to make this one work. Milan Mayer is getting dangerously close. Alexander Johansson has done everything he can on this time around the Bahrain International Circuit. But your winner will be Jan Haladej. Lights to flag victory. Johansson comes home in 3rd. Not quite going to be full. Oh! Milan Mayer loses out by just 0.06 of a second.
The other Ferrari, Rishan Jacobs, will come home in 5th. Tomaskal and Andre Molnar come home in 6th and 7th, with Andrew Karapi, Istvan Nagy, and Nicholas Aleda rounding out the top 10.
All so close. A matter of the hundredth of a second. That will be a kick up the backside, but Alexander Johansson finding the pace and showing that he is worthy of this championship as well, finding himself only just P3, and it didn't spark like the most overtaking as I was expecting, but still a very entertaining race indeed.
Yeah, brilliant, really. A decent race all around and entertaining on the penalties front, but once again, just not quite enough for Milan Mayer here. But let's not be disappointed or disheartened about it. It's been good overall. Everyone's been quite happy. And it's another great performance from qualifying at the very least for Jan Halliday. And at the very least, it's been a good race for him as well. Lights to flag, he saw nobody the entire time. Takes P1 honours, wins the race, clean as you like, no issues for him.
Who was your driver of the day? Put that in the chat who you thought definitely deserved it. Okay, my game definitely not as happy as game apparently gives it out to Nicola I did not catch that last name. But either way, wow. Just wow from today. As I mentioned, entertaining all throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect racing on the most part. A couple of instances, but definitely much better in terms of incident reporting between last week and this week. Certainly less collisions, more individual mistakes this week. But that is often the case with this track, particularly with Bahrain. It's one of which is pretty difficult to make your way around safely. But all things considered, great racing. It was interesting to see the early few laps with drivers rising and plummeting through the field.